Hello, and welcome to Mind, Body, Spirit, Food. This is a podcast that explores the cultural influences around food and how food connects us, but also disconnects us to our minds, our bodies, our spirits, the earth, and our communities. This is a space that is dedicated to bringing more ease, pleasure, and joy into the process of feeding ourselves. And today's episode brought me so much joy. I speak with Allie Slagle, who is the author of the James Beard Award-nominated cookbook, I Dream of Dinner, So You Don't Have to. And she's the publisher of the Substack newsletter, 40 Ingredients Forever. She's also a frequent contributor to the New York Times. And today we dive into spring cooking, and it got me so excited. So we go through a whole list of spring ingredients, starting with asparagus. We go through beets, greens, peas, strawberries, rhubarb, even lamb, and talk about our favorite ways to cook with them. I think if you're anything like us, even if you're new to the kitchen or whether cooking is your passion, this episode is going to get you so excited for all of these ingredients that are going to start hitting the markets soon. And I think it's going to open your eyes to the fact that sometimes the best way of enjoying some of these seasonal foods is the simplest way. You don't have to get complicated to create incredibly delicious food. Allie also shares her ideal menu for a spring party with Easter around the corner. This would be an amazing Easter menu, and I share mine as well. As always, an easy way that you can support this work is to rate the podcast on your podcast app or leave a comment. Share this episode with your friends and family. That really helps us out. Post about it on social media. And you can also become a subscriber to the Mind, Body, Spirit, Food newsletter, where I share weekly new recipes, all of which just happen to be gluten-free. And I dive into topics pertaining to how food connects us to ourselves as well as to others. If you become a paid member for just a couple of dollars a month, you make this entire ad-free space possible, and I am so deeply grateful for all of you paid members. All right, my friends, let's dive in. Hi, Allie. Welcome to the show.
Hi, it's so good to see you.
It's so good to have you here. I love your recipes. And in fact, like a little side note, the reason that Allie is on the show is because I made one of her recipes and I'm featuring an adapted version in my newsletter. And it was like a light bulb moment, like, I need to get this woman on the show, especially because we are recording this in March. And I feel like March is a tricky time for cooking for me here in the Northeast in the Hudson Valley, because it is definitely that shoulder season between winter and spring. We're going to dive into spring cooking and just get me excited and get me motivated. And all of our readers too. Well. Exactly. But before we get into all that, let's get to know you a little bit. So what is your cultural background and how has that influenced your relationship to food?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Los Angeles, so talk about like great food all the time. But I did grow up going to farmers markets and just always kind of being in the kitchen. My mom is Italian and always cooking. So I was very lucky to always have good food, but also just really simple food, like nothing too fussy, just food as a way of like, you need to feed yourself, but just really delicious because she doesn't want to kind of make any sacrifices. So I think that really influenced my cooking because she was busy, but she always wanted us to have good food. And so my goal in all of my work is to make sure people eat well, no matter what restrictions they have on that situation.
I love that because this is what I love about your recipes. And it's my mission as well, is to create recipes that are really accessible. And I get so inspired by very complicated recipes. And for a segment of my career, I believed that for things to be super successful or interesting, they had to be super complicated. And then you get wise at some point and you realize that simplicity is actually where so much joy and pleasure and flavor can be found in simplicity. And Italian cuisine is like the perfect example of all of that.
Yeah, when I think of like what my mom would cook, it's like there's nothing in it. It's like, how did that happen? I think a lot of us are just working too hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So You were obviously influenced by your mom and her cooking. How did you find this path of becoming a food writer? What did that look like for you?
So in high school, I worked at a travel bookstore and I thought I was going to go into book publishing and I was really interested in how books were made. So then when I went to college, I got an internship at Tense Breed Press, which just so happens to be a huge cookbook publisher. And then kind of like these two things kind of collided where I was like, oh, I can publish food books. And that was really exciting to me. And when I was there, I just learned a ton about how to write recipes, how to make food content interesting, sellable. I learned just from like the best of the best. And so when I was there, I met Kristen McGlory. I edited her first cookbook, Genius Recipes. She was the executive editor at Food 52. And then she brought me over and I moved to New York and that's it.
Wow, that's it. And when did you start writing recipes and content? Did that happen through Food 52 or did you just start doing that in your own kitchen and your own time?
Food 52 was this amazing place because it was still very much a startup when I was there and you kind of could do anything you wanted. So I was hired as an editor, but I also got to food style and prop style and develop recipes and write. And so when I was there, I kind of started learning about how to develop recipes. And then at a certain point, I went on my own because I wanted recipes to kind of be my focus.
I hear that. I hear that. So today we're going to dive into spring cooking, which, yay, we're going to get there. And this episode will air the week before Easter at the very end of March. So people will really be feeling like the excitement of all of the things that we're going to talk about. And I thought today would be more of like a dialogue between us just to share some of our favorite ways to use some of these awesome ingredients that are just about to hit the markets. And I'm going to start with one that to me is like the spring ingredient, and that is asparagus. And I know for me, I get like into the habit of like grill it, roast it, steam it. So like those are all wonderful ways to use asparagus, but how do you cook asparagus?
Yeah, I agree with you that asparagus is like the spring vegetable in my mind. In my Substack, 40 Ingredients Forever, asparagus is one of the 40 ingredients.
Oh, that's so fabulous.
So it's about to just all be asparagus every week really soon because that's kind of how my cooking shifts. It's like broccoli like retires and asparagus moves in. So I think to your point, yes, like a simply grilled asparagus is so wonderful. I think the other great thing about asparagus and a lot of the spring vegetables is you don't really need to cook them that much for them to be good. So I do actually really love raw asparagus, thinly sliced or like quickly blanched when you put it in pasta or something like that. But I do really like the shape of a thinly sliced asparagus, meaning like on the diagonal, really thin, 1/4 inch. It's just kind of like almost becomes like a crisp piece of rice or something, just like a crisp little bite or celery or something like that. I love it.
Yeah, it's surprising I feel like I kind of talk about this, but maybe I should devote a newsletter to it because the way you prepare, the way you prep ingredients really does influence their flavor. And with asparagus, especially if it's a tender piece of asparagus and it's thinly sliced like that, to me, it almost tastes sweet. It's got more sweetness than it would than were I to cook it. And you can really pick that up. And like Italian influences, like all you need is some lemon juice and really good olive oil and maybe some Parmesan. And like that's a beautiful side dish or salad or topping to chicken or shrimp or whatever.
Yeah.
Another thing I've been loving to do with asparagus is do like a miso maple situation and toss it and like smash up some miso paste and maple syrup. This is actually a recipe in my forthcoming book. And then you finish it with that and they become like umami and sweet and funky and all of it. And that's the kind of thing that I just want to eat out of the pan with my hands. Don't even put it on a plate.
It's kind of like back to like project cooking, but there's a really wonderful ottolenghi recipe that I made last spring and I almost made it this weekend. And then I was like, I'm too tired. I'm just going to roast it. But I think he blanches asparagus and green beans. It's on New York Times. And then it's like a miso lime, I think, dressing. And then like the key is this toasted coconut, chili, sugar, top crunchy thing. And last spring, I made it for guests and I like made all the components ahead so that it wouldn't be quite a production. And then you just toss it together right before you cook it. And everyone was like, what is this? I was like, I honestly don't know. There's so many things in it, but it's really worth it.
His recipes always have that surprise factor. Like they're always worth it. They always do take a little bit more time, but it's always revelatory. Like, wait, what? Like the lime juice with the coconut or whatever, I love that. And I'm going to have to get that link for you so I can share it in the episode notes.
Definitely.
I'm going to ask you about dandelion greens. Do you ever cook with dandelion greens?
I really like dandelion greens.
They're really bitter. So some people don't, but I'm with you. I love them.
Yeah, some people don't. My one downfall of dandelion greens is putting too much in a smoothie or a green juice. It really if you like want to learn about dandelion greens, don't do that. Like it's really way too much. But my favorite gateway recipe for me for dandelion greens was the Sarah Britton recipe. It's like lightly sauteed with, I want to say it definitely has radishes, seared radishes. And then I think it's like brown butter and a little apple cider vinegar. And I think the sweetness of the complements really like mellows it in a really pleasant way. But like for fans of broccoli rabe, like it's a very similar flavor that I really enjoy.
Yeah, it's really bitter. And there's something about that bitterness that feels so, I don't want to use the word healthy, but I want to use the word fortifying. Like I feel very fortified when I eat dandelion greens, but I love that sweetness, or I'll often do like something really punchy, like a really garlicky, vinegary. I do actually a recipe with baby potatoes and dandelion greens, and it's got olives and garlic and shallots and vinegar, and then I pile it over chicken paillard. And so there's some of that brightness that helps subdue the bitterness of the greens, because you and I love it, but not everybody in my family.
Not everyone. I think it's too like if you bought some and you're like, "Well, that's really intense for me," like mixing it with a friendlier green, like a romaine or an iceberg, like just to quell it a little bit, or cooking it for a really long time, like Greek, olive oil braised greens, like just kind of, or blanching it will kind of take some of that bitterness out. So if you're really going for it, we have options. And if you want kind of a mellow one, you can also cook it really well.
Such a great tip, that long cook, the greens that you cook for a long time, and then it really does mellow them out a lot. And dandelion greens, like with all of these, I feel like anchovies and garlic are just like, hey, we'll make you taste good. But that might just be me.
The key to everything we're saying is like lemon, garlic.
Yeah. Exactly. This is like the foundation of cooking right here. That's all you need. Okay, radishes, because I buy radishes year round. I love radishes, but we have a farm share. And when we get those little French radishes, or sometimes we get super spicy radishes, but they're always really fun to play with. How do you like to use them?
I was going to say my farm here has really great winter, like daikon and watermelon radishes right now. So I've been eating a lot of them right now. But my favorite thing about radishes is their size, in the sense that like you can just chop one for a salad or something. Yes. And it's not like a huge commitment like an English cucumber might be, or like even a stalk of celery sometimes.
Yeah.
So I really just like to add it to like any sort of grain. Even I did the other day, I made some like a bean soup and I added just some radishes on top. But anytime you just want like a little freshness, like where you might like rip off some herbs, but you don't have herbs, like I think a radish is a great option.
That is so true, because that's why I always have radishes on hand, because it's like a single serving. If I'm making like a quesadilla for lunch or a sandwich for lunch or whatever, I can just, slice up one or two radishes. It's not a huge investment.
Right. And they keep really well.
They keep really well. Yes, they absolutely do. And I love them. I mean, so classic with salted butter. I think that's just one of my favorites. Like I can't eat gluten, but thankfully we have a source of really good gluten-free bread here. But some salted butter, radishes, and flaky sea salt. I know everyone has done this. I hope if you haven't done this, try this. It's so good.
It's true.
It's true.
Speaking of bitter greens, radish greens are also very delicious.
Love that. Yes.
Yeah. If you buy radishes from the grocery store, you might need to like really wash them very well. But I think sauteing them with your spinach or your dandelion or something like that, like just don't throw them away. Like they have great flavor. So you might as well just throw them in.
Yay. That's the same for beets. And I'm always telling people to like use your beet greens. Beet greens are actually my favorite greens. They have a little bit of that sweetness that the root or that the bulbs, roots, the beets. What? Why don't I know this right now?
It's funny how like the simplest things sometimes just completely elude you.
Let's talk about beets because that's, we can start to get baby beets in the spring. And how do you like to cook them?
So I'm, again, like really simple on my beets, but I do really love beets. Right when I buy them, I pretty much have to cook them. Otherwise, they will just sit in the fridge and I will never use them.
That's a great tip right there. Mm-hmm.
Like it's almost like pre-cook them for yourself. So then you don't have to worry about them later. So I usually steam them just in my steamer basket. And then I'll thinly slice them and add some oil, salt and pepper, and red wine vinegar, like whatever really nice vinegar you have. And it's not like you're not making a dressing for them. You're kind of just seasoning them with some acid and fat and salt. And it really just like makes them more like themselves. And then I'll put them like in the winter right now, we've been doing a lot of like citrus, beet, avocado kind of salads. But as a side, we just like love it as a side for like grilled meats or anything. But whenever someone eats these beets, we're like, what did you do? And it's just like, it's undetectable, but it's just like a better version of a normal beet.
It's that vinegar or the citrus juice, whatever you use, like wakes them up. I do the same thing after I cook them. One thing that I started doing last year our market sometimes carries them, but this is something usually I get from our farm share, but we get these little baby beets. And I was over at my friend's one day and she threw them on the grill, like with their greens attached and everything. And I was like, what are you doing? And now I love grilling beets and they get super tender on the inside and you can eat the skin. You can just eat the whole thing and like drizzle that with some tahini sauce or yogurt sauce or like any kind of green sauce.
Does she cover the grill? Or
Yeah.
she leaves it open? Oh, covered it.
Yeah, covers them so that they take their time. But honestly, they didn't take as long as I would have expected them to. But they were like the size, smaller than a golf ball for sure. Like small little beets. But grill them. It was a revelation. Yeah. And I love doing that. Okay, artichokes. Another one of my favorites and very spring-like.
Yeah, I grew up eating a lot of artichokes. Honestly, my mom would buy them once from Trader Joe's and they were always very good. I don't know where they came from, but we liked them. She would just steam them and serve them with some butter and lemon. I'm so boring, but it's like, that's the truth. Yeah.
So not boring. No. So melted butter and lemon?
Melted butter and some lemon juice in the butter. Yeah.
That's exactly how I had them growing up. And I have two older brothers and it was so special for me because my brothers and my dad, like, I don't even think they've ever tried an artichoke. Like they are just so anti that experience, but it was always this special thing for my mom and I. It was like our special treat, artichokes. And we always had them with melted butter as well. But my husband's family always had them with mayonnaise. And so now I do love an aioli with artichokes. And I also love a bagna cauda. And the theme is coming back here for me, anchovies and garlic. Bagna cauda is an Italian sauce, olive oil, butter, anchovies, garlic. And I like to add a bunch of Parmesan cheese too. And that's a really fun way to eat artichokes because you get to like get a little bit of the cheese and a little bit of the butter and all of that. But I just steam them or boil them. I'm with you. Keep it simple.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, it's a prickly vegetable to kind of like break into. Yeah. So it is nice just to cook it whole. There are like a million other thinly sliced and whatever other things you could do with it. But I think because it browns really quickly and it's truly prickly, like it's easiest just to boil the whole thing or steam the whole thing.
Yeah. And it becomes the experience. Like it's an entire experience. And we'll do it now I've got two kids and my youngest loves it, but we'll do it as an appetizer, like 1 or 2 artichokes for all of us just to dig in. And it's like this hands-on experience of like, I don't know, something very primal about eating an artichoke, which I find very enjoyable. But what about peas? How do you do peas?
So to be honest, I think the best pea is a frozen pea because they were frozen at their peak. And they cook really quickly And fresh peas, if you can get them, are great, but like a little bit more work, like sometimes can be starchy. They're just not as consistent. So I don't usually buy fresh peas. I love snap peas. I think like snap pea is my number 2 favorite spring vegetable after asparagus. So those I get really excited about.
What do you do with snap peas besides just eat them?
Well, I was going to say it's the perfect snack.
Yeah.
It really is like bowl next to your computer, like not messy, don't have to cut them, very delicious. But again, I think like thinly slicing them raw in a salad is super delicious. I have a salad on New York Times Cooking that I really love, which is, I think like blanching in this season, blanching and steaming really brings out the best of spring vegetables. But one downside of blanching is that then the vegetables are really wet. And so like oil wants to go off of them instead of soak into them. And like drying blanched vegetables is kind of a pain. So I have this snap pea salad recipe that has you blanch them and then just kind of shake them dry, but you actually want the water on them. And then you toss them just in lemon juice and mustard. And so the mustard actually acts as the fat and the emulsifier, and the sauce kind of coats the snap peas in a really wonderful way. So you don't need to dry the snap peas. You don't need olive oil. And then it has like feta or Parmesan and walnuts, I think, and mint. But I made that very often.
That sounds amazing. And I'm loving the fact that you don't have to dry them, that the water, it's necessary for that emulsification. And you don't even need oil. This is, okay. I will definitely link to that recipe. Since you talked about blanching, can you share how you would blanch these spring vegetables, just in case somebody's like kind of new to this whole cooking thing and they might not be sure what that is?
Great question. So get a pot of water boiling, salt it pretty well. This is kind of your one chance to salt the vegetables. So I just eyeball it and go pretty heavy, kind of as if I was cooking pasta. And then you add the vegetables. And there's this moment when like asparagus, snap peas, even peas kind of turn from a muted green to a bright kind of like leafy green. And a lot of people will say like taste a piece of the vegetable and see if it's done. I often find it just like too hot to do that. And for me, I think one of the best things about spring vegetables is they are good a little underdone. Like they're still good with a little crispness. So once it changes to that bright green, like it might be a little crunchy still. It might be totally perfect. By perfect, I mean like tender and just a little snap. But when it turns bright green, I pull them. So I just like will take them out of the water. And if I'm like feeling really committed to my vegetables, I will put them in an ice bath. But usually I will just put them in a colander and run a little cold water over them just to kind of stop the cooking. And then they can go back into the fridge and be like a pre-cooked vegetable for you, or you can do whatever you need with it.
That's such a great tip for entertaining as well, is to like blanch this. If you're doing a snap pea salad or green beans, even for the holidays, I will always blanch them ahead, because then from there, you can either just toss them raw into a salad, or you could saute them really quickly with seasonings in a pan. But it's like that step gets knocked off. And then they're so usable from that point. It's kind of like how you cook the beets right away when you get home from the grocery store. I always wash my greens right away when I get home from the grocery store, because then I'm likely to use them.
Yeah.
It's like the hurdle. What is your hurdle when it comes to getting the food on the plate? I think we all have different ones.
And this time of year too, it's like salads become really exciting again because there's so many colors and textures. But it is that hurdle at like 2:00 when you're hungry and you're like, I would like a salad, but there are like many steps of like chopping and cooking between me and that salad. So if you pre-cook your beets, blanch your vegetables, like have a dressing ready to go, like a really great salad is very easy this time of year.
I go both ways between like prep in the sense that I don't like to spend my Sundays like doing meal prep. But I also love it when I invest like even just a few minutes of making a quick vinaigrette for the week. And I just, shake it up in a jar and have that. Or like I said, like washing the stuff right when I get home from the market. I have to do that. That way, like we can pull together even just a green salad almost nightly for dinner we do in my household. But all those little steps, like what is it for you as a listener that might be the biggest barrier, and try to like knock that out? early.
Right.
When you can.
And I think too, like, I actually wrote a story during COVID about like all the things you can do with a pot of boiling water. So it's like, if you're going to boil pasta for dinner, like maybe you don't want asparagus in like tonight's dinner, but like use that pot of water, spend 3 minutes to boil asparagus, put it in the fridge for tomorrow, and then use that same pot of water for pasta. Like there's some flavor contribution, but it's minimal. And the pot of water is already there. So like just use it for 3 minutes to blanch some vegetables, you know?
Such a good tip. And I love how you said that about frozen peas as well. I wanted to circle back to that because my husband and I laugh because we grow peas every year and we have literally never cooked a pea that we've grown because it's like we just eat them. I mean, the kids like will become little rabbits in the garden with the peas. And even if we harvest what feels like a ton of peas, it ends up being like a half a cup of peas. And they're best eaten raw, I think, when they're straight from the garden because they're super sweet and crunchy and like so fun. So I'm totally with you, the frozen peas.
I don't know the math on like how many pods of peas it takes to get like 1 cup of peas, but when you could just open a bag and they are very delicious, like it's fine. Just do that.
One thing we love to do, actually, I'm just remembering this. I think this was a recipe in my first book, actually, but to throw a bag of frozen peas blanch them in boiling water with salt, and then put them into a food processor with a little bit of garlic. You don't need a lot, butter and mint, and just puree it. And it becomes this really delicious mash we love it with lamb chops, but it's also lovely with shrimp or as a bed for like chicken or fish or something like that, just like a simple side dish. The nice thing about that too is like we always have frozen peas on hand. So if I'm always like, oh, what kind of side dish can I make tonight? And we have nothing in the fridge, it's like minty pea mash.
Make it easy. The moral of the story is like lemon, garlic, anchovy, mint. I would add mint to the corral of like, what do you do to a spring vegetable? Like, there's something about the like minerality of it that goes really well with the sweetness and the bitterness of the vegetables.
Yeah. And I'm actually going to have an upcoming episode all about herbs, which I can't wait for because in the spring, fresh herbs can instantly wake up any kind of meal, from a salad to a main course to a soup. What about potatoes, new potatoes, like those little baby potatoes? How do you like to cook them?
So I'm coming to the realization that I might be a little allergic to potatoes.
Oh, no way.
I haven't actually like really dug into it, but if anyone out there experiences this too, I would love to know why this is happening. But my tongue and my lips get really tingly when I eat a potato.
Sounds like an allergy.
Yeah, exactly. But I like when I eat a French fry, it's fine. It's really just like if I grill it or steam it or boil it, which rounding back, that is how I like to eat little baby potatoes. I think like a boiled salted potato that you like break open and put some dressing on when it's still hot, or some butter, like, and a little flaky salt and pepper. Like that is just the best.
So good. There's something I like doing. I think it's a recipe from Ina Garten, I'm pretty sure. But my mom used to do this, and I do this now too, is you get like a heavy lidded pot, a Le Creuset or a Dutch oven or something like that. And you put the new potatoes in the cold pot with a couple knobs of butter and a few sprigs of herbs, if you have them, like rosemary or thyme, and salt and pepper. And then you cook them with the lid on over like low, medium, low heat. And you just shake the pot every now and then. And they turn they're so tender on the inside and almost like that concentrated flavor because they haven't lost anything. I'm like remembering all of these things as we talk.
That's exactly how I feel. What will I have to look forward to? But I think just like beets, like pre-cooking your baby potatoes is really helpful because they can take up to 25 to 30 minutes to boil. I really like to par cook them and then smash them like between my hands or under a mug, and then either roast them or I really like to grill them as well. And what happens is when you expose the starch from the inside, it creates a crispy coating on the outside, which helps them get nice and crispy.
One of my favorite things ever. That's one of my favorite things ever. Okay, this is an exciting one because I have been dying to make a rhubarb galette, but I have yet to see a single stalk of rhubarb in the markets. Do you cook with rhubarb? Do you like it? What do you do with it?
I really love it. And I always buy like one bunch a season and I think about what I'm going to do with it all season. And then I just always do the exact same thing, which is really just slicing it up, simmering it with sugar and maybe a little lemon juice, and basically just making a compote. Like, I think it's the most concentrated way to enjoy it and the most everyday way to enjoy it, because you can have it on toast or yogurt, on ice cream. But I think the key for me to a rhubarb experience, which my friend Sarah Jampel, who's a baker, taught me, is like, whatever you're making, at the end, add a little bit more thinly sliced rhubarb, and having that like crunchy raw part in the softness is like, it's just like these bolts. It's kind of like a celery in a salad. It's so good.
That is an amazing tip, and I have not tried that.
So I'll make a compote, like have it really simmer down, and then add thinly sliced raw rhubarb at the end. And it's just like, that's it for me. Yeah.
Okay. I know what I'm doing with the rhubarb when I see it. Another thing I like to do is to roast it. I'll do like a big thing of strawberries, a big thing of rhubarb, and just toss it with brown sugar and maple syrup and a little bit of salt. So chop up the strawberries and chop up the rhubarb, spread them out in a parchment-lined pan, and roast them until they're really tender. It almost makes a compote. And then when they're still hot, you want to scrape everything into a bowl and it gets all soft and juicy. And we'll spoon that over scones or pancakes or shortcakes or yogurt or whatever. But that's like an easy way, kind of hands-off way to cook it.
I think like dandelion greens, like rhubarb can be kind of intense for people. But if you like that tanginess, I really love rhubarb with raspberry. So like whenever you find a strawberry rhubarb thing, like using raspberry and maybe a little bit more sugar instead, I think is really, really good.
I love that combination. I don't think I've tried it, which is, I'm not sure why. So here we go. So I know that lemons are not necessarily a spring ingredient, but we've talked about lemons a lot, or at least lemon juice a lot. And for me, I guess the flavor of fresh lemon juice, like I'm thinking of, I have a lemon olive oil cake or a lemon pudding cake. Like those are my favorite spring desserts. How do you love to highlight lemon in the spring?
That's a good question. I think about lemon, like you said, as a year-round ingredient that adds some like springiness all the time. So I think kind of like one of the unfortunate truths about spring is, at least where I live, like the vegetables actually show up much later than I want them to. Like I'm ready right now, or I'm buying it from the grocery store because I'm impatient and it doesn't taste like how I think I want it to taste. But I think like lemon is the solution to both of those issues. Like adding a bunch of lemon juice or lemon. I think also like lemon zest is particularly fruity and flavorful. So using just a microplane and adding zest to the top of something, whether that's blanched asparagus or snap peas, like it's all of the fruity brightness of lemon without a lot of the bitterness. So I think just like a final dusting of lemon zest, as you might Parmesan, kind of highlights the lemon and just like makes things feel more springy.
Yeah, that's such a great tip. And you can do that over pasta. You can do that over risotto. You can do that over fish or chicken, like any kind of vegetable, like you said. And then you don't need to worry about too much acid. It's just you get that sunshine flavor, that happy sunshine lemon flavor.
Yeah. I have a recipe coming out that I love, like that a lot of spring vegetables all cook at the same rate and like in a similar way. So I have a recipe coming that's like roasted green beans, asparagus, and scallions. And so they're like really sweet and caramelized. And then you just finish it with some lemon zest, and you can add some sliced radishes too. But it just like lifts the whole thing, and the lemon is there, but not overpowering.
That sounds so good. Okay, two more things that are coming to mind. One is strawberries. And like you said, like where I live in the Hudson Valley, realistically, spring doesn't start till June here, but we're just going to ignore that because it make me really depressed. So strawberries, what do you like to do with strawberries besides eat cartons of them when you can?
I like to eat them when I can. And I also think strawberries are very fiddly. Like when they're good, they're so good. And very often they are not that like perfectness.
True.
So I think when you get a batch of like not perfect strawberries, like you do with your rhubarb, just like slowly roasting them in a low temperature oven, like 325, so that all their juices concentrate. You can add a little sugar. There's a recipe I make that sometimes actually adds ground coriander, which adds like some citrusy flavor.
Interesting.
But cooking them down releases all of their juice and kind of concentrates the water. So it's their most flavorful self. I think that's good. And similarly macerating. So like thinly slicing the strawberries, adding a little sugar. You could add some lemon zest too, and just stirring it throughout the day will bring out their flavor.
Such great tips, because you're absolutely right. When you get the carton of the strawberries that blow your mind, A, they have to be eaten within like 2 days because they do not last. And B, like there is no sense in cooking those because they're just little perfect gems just on their own.
Exactly.
One more, which is like, I know we've been talking a lot about produce, which was kind of the theme, but we're going to go off topic. Because lamb, for me, at least with Easter coming up and other spring holidays, this is a great season for lamb. I should ask you first if you eat lamb, because not everyone does. And if you don't, we will pretend like that question was never asked.
Not only do I eat lamb, but I lived on a lamb farm last year.
Okay.
So they harvested lamb and they had cows too. So I love lamb. I love the animals, but I also like to eat them. So I have a freezer full of lamb at all times because I get a lot of lamb from the farm.
Okay, so share. I love lamb. I love lamb. You probably have different cuts, but do you have like a few different suggestions for people who might be new to cooking lamb? How do you like to do it?
So I think there's like a couple strategies when it comes to lamb. I think it's similar to dandelion, and like one is to embrace its flavor and let it kind of take over. And that's one of my favorite things about lamb is that you don't actually have to do a lot to it to make the dish really flavorful because it brings so much. It has so much fat and kind of interesting flavor. I think the other option is like it's a really assertive flavor, so it can take a lot of flavor. You can add a ton of spices and heat and texture and make like a really robust dish. So my favorite recent thing I've made with lamb is a recipe from my newsletter. It's crispy rice with lamb, and it's actually lemon rice. How you make it is you take ground lamb, you make a big patty, you get it really brown in the pan, and then you add rice and a bunch of lemon juice and zest, and you cook it all together. So there's something about like the savory, grassy lamb with the brightness of the lemon that is very wonderful. And then you crisp the rice, kind of tahdig style, flip it out, put a bunch of herbs, like truly just call it a day.
That sounds like maybe my most favorite combination of things. I'm definitely going to make that recipe. I think ground lamb is a great entry point for people who might not be so used to cooking with lamb or eating lamb. I do a lamb flatbread pizza, and basically you cook ground lamb and then toss in a bunch of mint pesto. And the mint pesto is made, just like a regular pesto, but with either mint and parsley or mint and basil. I'd like to do a mix. But then you basically top flatbread. You can use naan bread. You could use like cauliflower pizza crusts with whole milk Greek yogurt and that minty lamb on top, and then feta. And then you drizzle more of the mint pesto on when it comes out of the oven. But it takes away some of the gaminess of the lamb, which I think for some people, that might be the thing that they're not so sure about.
Yeah. Living on the farm, which was in Oregon, I learned a lot about like different lamb cuts. And I think the gaminess has to do with like the fat content in the lamb. And so picking leaner cuts of lamb will kind of help you with that gaminess problem. So actually one of my favorite cuts, which I had never had until I lived there, was a lamb leg steak. So it's the leg, but it's kind of like, it just looks like a New York strip or something. But if you just grill it, it's like, it has a really firm, enjoyable texture, and the flavor is super mild. I think if you like steak, a lamb leg steak is a good first entry point as well, in addition to ground lamb.
That is such a great tip. And I love that little hint about the fat content and how that really is what gives that gamey flavor. So if you're trying to avoid that, you know where to go. Now, one last thing that I wanted to ask, because this is airing the week before Easter and a lot of the spring holidays are happening either right now or, we're coming up on Mother's Day and all of that stuff. If you were to plan a simple menu for having friends over or for entertaining, what would you choose right now, highlighting some of these spring ingredients?
So I think there's like a couple of themes that we've touched. This is very exciting to think about, like in Easter, or also I celebrate Persian New Year every year. So it's like that time of like green herbs is very exciting to me. So also I think it's like the first moment when we can start grilling again, at least in the Northeast. So I would say like a big crunchy salad with all the things we've talked about, like thinly sliced snap peas, radishes, maybe some blanched asparagus. I think mixing raw and cooked is a really nice way to get lots of textures in our spring salads. And then a grilled lamb. My favorite like entertaining style lamb is a boneless leg marinated in pesto and grilled. And it's pretty easy to cook because it's pretty thin when it's deboned. It's kind of flat like this, kind of like a brisket. And it's not an evenly shaped piece of meat. So you get some well done pieces and some raw pieces, but I think it's like so good. And then maybe some yogurt sauce. And I think the other thing is like we get really excited for all these spring vegetables, but then we're just like, we don't want to feel like a rabbit. So I think like having a soft cheese, like, or a yogurt sauce, like some sort of like just mozzarella with oil, like having some fat and some richness to counter the crispness of the vegetables is really, I think, like brings the meal together.
I love that balance. And what would you serve for dessert?
Okay, I would probably do a rhubarb raspberry crisp crumble kind of thing.
Yes.
With some ice cream.
I think I would start with whipped ricotta crostini because I have this memory the first time I made them when I was like 20. It was a long time ago. My husband and I lived in Brooklyn and we went to the farmer's market and I got beets, and it was literally the first time I ever cooked beets at home. I mean, I'd gone to culinary school and cooked beets, but I didn't think I liked beets at that time. And I cooked them and we did the beet greens and the roasted beets. And we did like roasted beets and the beet greens on this whipped ricotta crostini. And it was like the first time I fell in love with beets. And so I think I would do that for him. And then I think I would do chicken because that's what we do for Easter, just with me and my little family here, like a lemon garlic roast chicken or something super simple. Asparagus, simple.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I'm 100% with you for dessert, like some sort of crisp. I love a warm crisp with a cold scoop of ice cream is one of the best spring desserts. And now I'm so excited.
This is like therapy. It really helps like lift the spirit talking about asparagus.
Well, I want to thank you so much. I think this conversation is going to uplift people and get them excited for all of this produce that's coming our way, but also it's a reminder that you don't need much. Lemon juice, olive oil, garlic, maybe anchovies, mint if you have it. That the best way in a lot of situations to honor these vegetables is to treat them simply and to know that that's enough. Like we don't need to overcomplicate things. I will link to your newsletter. And where else can people find you?
Substack is the greatest place to find me. I'm really enjoying publishing there. And I have an Instagram and I have a cookbook.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay. I have one more question. This is the last question I ask all my guests, and it's just a fun one. It's your last meal on earth. What would it be in this moment? After all of that.
One question. That's so hard.
I always tell people, I'm like, especially for people like you and I who like our passion is food. I'm like, listen, what I tell you in this moment will be different in an hour. So in this moment, what would you want?
Oh my gosh. I cannot answer that question. It's so hard. I know there would be an arugula salad. Speaking of simple things, arugula salad with lemon and oil and Parmesan. I have a recipe on the New York Times. You need a lot less dressing than you think. That is like one of my top 5 favorite foods. I think nothing beats it, especially if you can get really delicious arugula. So I would definitely have that. And something else that I don't know. My gosh. Impossible question. I'll get back to you.
No, you have to. One thing. Okay.
Okay, I have another one.
Yes.
My mom's garlic chicken, which again is like, there's nothing in it, but it's 40 cloves of garlic, unpeeled, in a braising dish with oil, whatever aromatics, bone-in, skin-on chicken. She covers it. She braises it for an hour and a half. And the garlic gets super melty. You spread that on some bread. That with an arugula salad and some sort of fruit dessert.
I'm so glad I pressured you because that sounds amazing. And I know now Easter dinner, I think you just named it for me. So
I'll send you the recipe. The recipe is like, handwritten and scanned and whatever, but it's the best thing.
Yes. Thank you so much, Allie. It's been such a joy.
Thank you. It was fun.
Thank you so much for listening. If this work resonates with you in any way, you can support it by leaving a review or comment or sharing it with friends. Also, you can sign up for the newsletter, Mind, Body, Spirit, Food. And by becoming a paid member for just $5 a month, you help fund this entire project. Thank you so much to all of you who are already subscribed, especially to those paid subscribers. This work could not happen without you. I'm Nikki Sizemore, and as always, remember to nourish yourself with intention and love.